Despite backlash after repeated backlash, Bethesda in conjunction with Amazon have been devising all sorts of new and innovative ways of rigorously defiling the already decrepit corpse that is the Fallout franchise. Key jangling the iconography of an IP that they bought, and unequivocally did not earn, to distract an audience of tourists and sycophants from the catastrophically brain-dead changes made to the lore. Like retconning Vault-Tec into a bunch of inbred sociopaths who unironically believe the best means of winning the game of capitalism is to wipe out human civilization.
Our vaults have the resources to survive for centuries. Meanwhile, our competitors, every other human who isn't us, will be dead on the surface. That is how we will win the great game of capitalism, not by outfighting anyone, but by outliving them.
How can you guarantee results?
By dropping the bomb ourselves.
The fuck is wrong with you? Please go see a therapist, you psycho.
Among a slew of other fun changes, and inexplicably receiving universal praise for it.
The Fallout show may have some flaws, and people who, really care about the lore may not care for it, but it's extremely faithful to the source material. Take notes, other video game adaptations. This is how you tap into the elusive, broader audience.
The good news, though, everybody, is that the Fallout TV show is very good, in my opinion. I went to the premiere, actually. Amazon invited me to the premiere, and it was awesome. I took my mom.
Is that Seattle? Or LAX? I really liked this season.
Yeah, this is amazing.
I really liked it a lot. It didn't let me down. It stuck the landing for me.
I think this may be the best Fallout story. I really do. Yep. Like, when I'm talking about a well-told story that just comes together at the end, I do think the Fallout TV show arguably has the best.
I think when it comes to Fallout fans, the Fallout TV show is a must-watch.
It is one of the few game-to-film adaptations that works. 8 out of 10 stars.
And can I just say, the ending, the final shot.
Woo! And for the record, this isn't just another typical video game adaptation. Todd Howard himself confirmed that the series is canon to the franchise well before the first season even released, which means any continuity breaks that take place in the show also retroactively shatters the continuity and world building of the games, given that this is a direct sequel in the Fallout timeline. You cannot appeal to the games still existing if there is active damage being done to them. Or, well, I suppose you can, but it would be pretty goddamn disingenuous.
But will Season 2 sort of confirm one ending over another for New Vegas? Because obviously players have the choice to pick their ending.
Yeah, I would say this, we approached it like, hey, we need to honor all of those endings. And Graham and Geneva came up with some great ways to sort of do that, and this idea of this fog of war in terms of what happened, what didn't happen. And so we answer in places, and each faction has a little bit of their own view, and sometimes we don't answer. Sometimes it's intentionally ambiguous.
Holy fuck, Mother and Christmas, Todd. Decanonizing the endings does not honor the choices players made in New Vegas. It reduces them into being completely pointless. The NCR, Caesar's Legion, and Mr. House can't all believe they won the Hoover Dam and the Vegas Strip. The central conflict of the game revolves around the courier ultimately determining which faction gains control of them. And again, I cannot stress this enough, Season 2 is a direct sequel. But by implementing this fog of war approach, Bethesda and Amazon have completely erased the events of New Vegas from the Fallout timeline. Which, let's be real, was always the intent with the show, but Season 2 wastes little time removing all doubt of that being the case, with the first episode introducing us to the real Mr. House. That's right, it turns out the one we saw in the first season was a body double or a figurehead of sorts. What benefit he gets from this, I have absolutely no idea, considering he goes out and commits street-level crimes in broad daylight for the sake of market research, which kind of defeats the whole point of the whole anonymity thing, but I'm jumping the gun a bit here. So Mr. House starts covertly simping for himself, in a bar full of Robco union protesters, that he's a massive supporter of their employer and that
every dollar spent is a vote cast. And that fellow right there, he has more votes than every one of those pan-headed politicians in Washington. And if the will of the American people was to endow that man with a significant portion of his wealth, well, good golly, that can't be a bad thing now, can it? Obsolescence. It's a heck of a thing. You know, I try and see it from your perspective. but it's hard to imagine being so dim as to be caught off guard by the inevitable.
It really cannot be overstated just how insane it is that the line "war never changes" from the Fallout games used to emphasize the central theme of mankind's inherent conflict with each other never changing, ultimately getting subverted and reconstructed into a capitalism bad message, all because a room full of corporate executives wanted to nuke the entire world for the most hyper-retarded reasons imaginable. Furthermore, you're really going to pitch to me that the rubbered house we encountered in the game, who ultimately wanted to use technology to advance mankind to a point of searching for a planet unscathed by nuclear devastation, would walk into a pre-war bar and call them obsolete directly to their faces as a means of coaxing them into having horrific mind control experiments done on them, let alone be wasting his time with any of this in the first place, since the game well establishes that at this stage all of his focus would have been poured into building the necessary systems to defend Las Vegas from impending nuclear hellfire. Nor should we gloss over that he pulls this batshit crazy stunt just around the corner from a relatively packed bar. I mean, what exactly was his plan if someone saw him blow this guy's head off? Why even take the risk of having all this be linked back to himself or his body double in the first place, when he absolutely has the facilities and the resources to run these experiments way more discreetly? Hell, he could have Vault-Tec do it for him, since we know they were already conspiring together at this point. Also, the way this whole alley scene takes place is really awkward. So House asks Baldy to punch him in the mouth, so he does, but doesn't continue beating the shit out of him when it was heavily implied that they were about to brawl it out in this alley, where House then reveals his comical amount of money to them and offers to give it to Baldy if he agrees to stab this Mesmatron-style device into the back of his neck, where he refuses and instead suggests that the three of them now beat the shit out of him and take his money. As would be expected, since it's no secret that the three of them already don't like him, only for House to catch Baldy off guard and the other two sit back and do nothing while watching their friend get stabbed in the neck.
What in the goddamn?
On top of all of this, the show has now officially cemented that Mr. House was developing a device capable of mind control that had reached past the prototype phase, and either chose to do absolutely nothing with it, despite having spent millions of caps on scavengers to hunt down his lost technology after the bombs fell, or just completely forgot about it. And if I'm being honest, I'm not sure which of those is worse. Never mind that turning people into mindless drones is something that the real Mr. House would never ever do, since he viewed slavery as antithetical to human progress. We are barely 5 minutes in, and this show has already debased Mr. House into a sadistic psycho murderer, while in the same breath inflicting irreparable damage to the world building of New Vegas.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
And the punches keep on rolling as we jump back to present-day Novak. Or rather, Amazon's bastardization of Novak, because it's revealed that the Great Khans have overtaken the town. This on its own is more than likely already raising a ton of eyebrows for those who've played the game, because the four main outcomes for their faction result in either the Khans assimilating into the NCR, getting absorbed by Caesar's Legion, fleeing to Wyoming, or getting totally wiped out. There is no fifth option where after the Battle of Hoover Dam, they would have magically had the manpower and the resources to gun down everyone in Novak, especially with Helios 1 having been moved way closer to the town, for some reason, which is occupied by the NCR. Furthermore, I suppose I should address the rather oversized dinosaur in the room. My argument for it facing the opposite direction from the game being bad isn't because it's simply a change from the game. It's that Fallout New Vegas specifically lays out that the Dinky statue is a major asset for the town, because they use it as a sniper's nest to fend off raider and any immune attacks from Highway 15. How, pray tell, could it have possibly ever served that function, along with it being used to discreetly take out the woman who sold Boone's wife and unborn child into slavery, on top of being originally created as an advertisement for the motel, if the statue is facing the motel? Did the citizens of Novak randomly decide to simply push it somewhere else? The actual answer to those questions is that the showrunners wanted the scene to happen in front of the motel, and they wanted to have Lucy and the dinosaur statue, so they flipped it around, despite that making absolutely no sense. Speaking of which, as the Khans are in the middle of hanging the ghoul, Lucy pops her head out and starts spouting off a rather lengthy string of cringe dialogue in the hopes that they will just simply let the both of them go. Why she would entertain that being a remote possibility is a bit beyond me, given that the Khans have already murdered everyone in Novak, and that she turned the ghoul in for the bounty money. They are not just going to let the man who's terrorized their clan for decades, because of fucking course he has, just walk away despite having given her a considerable amount of caps in order to finally settle their score. The counter that Lucy is simply a naive vault dweller who believes and sees the good in people holds about as much weight as a wet paper napkin when factoring in all the traumatic horrors of the wasteland she had to endure during Season 1. While the pieces that were supposed to establish her character arc absolutely did not remotely fit together, the finale made it clear that Lucy is forever a changed person. During her whole diatribe, she even points out that her and the ghoul have pulled other con jobs like this on other groups in order to get by, and it inevitably leads to violence.
I would shoot him down, you take your weapons, and use whatever violence necessary in order for us to escape. Which, in my experience thus far, it's a lot of violence.
Which again, kinda begs the question as to why Lucy is even bothering with fucking any of this. It's frankly insane that they let her ramble on for as long as she does instead of immediately shooting her, since it couldn't be any more obvious that she's reneged on their deal. To make matters worse, all of this pissed dialogue gets spewed while Cooper Howard is suffocating in the background. Apparently, the ghoul, who was practically impervious to gunshots and survived being buried underground for over a year during Season 1, is susceptible to choking now. Not only is this absolute abortion of a show incapable of adhering to any shred of pre-established world building from the games, it can't even keep its own drug-fueled continuity straight. However, the cons naturally refuse to let the both of them go, and so a massive shootout takes place, resulting in the ghoul effortlessly mowing them all down to the tune of Big Iron by Marty Robbins. This bit of shamelessly ham-fisted fan service is not just unearned, but it's tonally out of place with what's happening on screen. The overall meaning of the song is about the outlaw, Texas Red, facing the deadly consequences of underestimating the skill of the ranger, and about justice and bravery prevailing in a practically lawless land. They could have set all this up to have the ghoul being driven on getting revenge against the cons for wiping out Novak, or wanting to finish off what's left of their clan, but that's not the reason why he has Lucy turn him over to the group. He simply just wants their money and whatever they have in their safe. In fact, him expressing mild disappointment that one of the store owners is dead is rather out of pocket for him, since he regularly drops bangers like,
"When something's dead, it's usually because it deserved to die.
Empathy's like mud. You lose your boots in that stuff."
Ass jerky don't make itself.
The writers insist on revering him as this grizzled, badass anti-hero, hardened through centuries of traveling the wastes, but the ghoul is about as morally gray as Ted Bundy, making Lucy's decision to continue to pal around with him even stranger given their history together. I mean, she already knows that her father is somewhere in New Vegas. What exactly does she stand to gain by placing her safety, and vice versa, in the hands of a ruthless opportunist, other than that they're both after the same person for entirely different reasons? Regardless, the ghoul and Lucy have a chat, so to speak, about their differing methods.
"I know you think you're being helpful, shooting folks in the kneecaps and the ass. But if I'm being honest, you ain't. Well, all that matters to me is you shoot that fucking rope."
Well, I did, didn't I?
That is not his point, you fucking airhead. The reality is, you nearly got him killed, all because you thought, for some asinine reason, could sway the cons out of following through on their blood feud, paired with believing that you were doing the moral and ethical thing by crippling people out in the wastes, leaving them to die a slow, agonizing death, rather than doing the actual humane thing of quickly putting them out of their misery. I realize the irony of having any of this come from the ghoul would be incredibly rich, but this is a lesson of the wasteland that Lucy bafflingly did not learn during the first season, and it is a pity that he doesn't drill into her after failing to recognize the consequences of her actions. Instead, we cut over to Vault 33, where an inbred moron, and no, I'm being quite literal unfortunately, is interrupting a group of engineers and the overseer from working on the Vault's broken water chip. What was brought up as a gag during the first season is apparently now a legitimate concern for the survival of everyone inside the vaults. Except they all seem to have forgotten the original residents of 32 all ended up killing each other. It's how Moldaver took it over without a scratch, and held a faux wedding for absolutely no reason. The people that are living there now were former 33 vault dwellers, which means they could just use 32's chip and distribute the water between the two vaults. So why, in the burger flipping fuck, don't they do that? Well, the obvious answer is that everyone in this show is a retard, including the people who are allegedly not the product of cousin stuff.
After 10 years of cousin stuff, I'm definitely excited for the real thing.
However, we jump back to Lucy and the Ghoul, where after taking such a massive detour, have still miraculously wandered upon Hank's trail. Never mind that he practically flew his ass to the Mojave during the finale, so there shouldn't even be so much as a blood trail, let alone footprints. Rest assured, Season 2 absolutely does not buck the trend of relying heavily on unfathomably wild and nonsensical contrivances to drive the plot. Nonetheless, the two of them decide to ask a nearby merchant if she happened to have spotted Hank walking through her camp.
I'd like 1 bowl of Flea Soup. So, just wondering if you happen to see...
Eat it while it's hot, miss.
There are 1,000 different reasons for why this scene deserves to be consumed in a gasoline-filled toaster bath, but the obvious one being no one in the Fallout universe eats fleas. No civilization throughout the course of human history has ever eaten fleas. And if there's someone in the current day that eats them, then they clearly need to be put in a straitjacket immediately. Secondly, there are plenty of other game-accurate weird foods like iguana bits, yao guai meat, or hell even radroaches that would have made this joke actually work. This could have been an endearing moment of Lucy, stumbling upon a wholesome and generous elderly woman while being blindsided by the type of food people out in the Mojave have to live on in order to survive, doing the typical gag about lying about the taste and then tossing the rest off to the side when she isn't looking. But no. Instead, you have this schizoid freak who, rather than hunting or farming bighorn, Brahmin, or planting crops, decides that she's going to find an animal infested with fleas so that she can open a shop to sell soup out in the middle of nowhere that absolutely no one is willing to buy. Well, except for this plot-armored window licker. Regardless, she points them in the direction where Hank went and the two of them continue the trail. That they could have just kept following this entire time and not bothered with this worthless conversation, since neither of them have the basic sense to ask her any follow-up questions. But it's at this point, though, in their long trek across the Mojave, that the Ghoul finally asks her what she plans on doing once they find her father.
Gonna bring him to justice, so people know that how they conduct themselves matters.
Well, I hate to break it to you, darling, but the way you was raised wasn't real.
Oh look, an establishing character trait for Lucy. I wonder if the writers are going to remain consistent with that at all. Also, the idea that no one in the wasteland actually gives a damn about bringing people to justice is rather weird coming from the guy who's worked as a bounty hunter for nearly 2 centuries. A profession in the world of Fallout that's largely based on bringing criminals to justice or getting revenge against people. Though we don't get the chance to linger on any of that, because we then jump back to a pre-war flashback of Cooper Howard having a nice chat with the fan favorite Lee Moldaver, the woman who manipulated her best friend's daughter into sleeping with a filthy raider and nearly had her killed.
They sat around that table and they talked about the ending of the world like they were talking about a new business strategy.
Sounds like you heard something interesting.
What you knew?
And now you do too, so... what are we gonna do about it?
Wait, so that device you gave him wasn't recording anything? Why? Why would you not have recorded that meeting? That would have been proof, you know, that you could have used in a court of law? I thought the whole point of having him spy on Vault-Tec was to get incriminating evidence against Vault-Tec. What benefit do you get just from him simply knowing all this?
Are you familiar with Robert House?
The guy owns half of Las Vegas.
He's also building a privately owned missile system in Las Vegas with enough firepower to follow through on your wife's proposals.
We're not gonna make it, are we? People, I mean.
Aside from the unfettered dog shit that was the previous season, There really isn't a more damning example that proves, beyond any doubt, that this show is nothing more than an elaborate ploy to decanonize everything that isn't Bethesda Fallout. Even if this is just pure speculation on her end, there is simply no literary reason for this to exist. It's been artificially inserted into the scene to create this aura of mystery and suspicion about Mr. House possibly having his hand on the buttons for the nukes, which is profoundly fucking ridiculous, because why, in the absolute hell, would Robert House purposely have the platinum chip, the one piece of technology that he needed to significantly upgrade his defense systems to be able to protect all of Vegas, printed a day late when he is the one who ultimately determines when the world ends?
By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
It's because there is no legitimate answer. This is a deliberate act of franchise sabotage, and believe me, this is by far not the only example of this. Moving on though, we cut back to the present, where Lucy and the ghoul discover that Hank opened Vault 24. A cut vault from New Vegas.
Every time I step foot in one of these concrete shoeboxes, I gotta make peace with the fact that I might finally learn what happened to my wife and my daughter.
You were with your daughter on the day the bombs dropped, you idiot. How would you not know what vault you put her in? I mean, really, the both of you should have been vaporized since you were both on horseback while multiple nukes hit LA, but that's neither here nor there.
I know about the experiments. Been to Vault 4.
Vault 4 is the best case scenario.
No, it is not. In fact, it is quite literally the opposite. Loads of people died from those horrific experiments. Lucy is from a control vault, or what is effectively a control vault, along with the tidbit of the NCR, the faction that he supposedly has a ton of history with, having been formed from the descendants of Vault 15, so the ghouls should know better than anyone that control vaults exist. However, upon venturing further down, they discovered that the Vault 24 scientists were developing and running trials on the mind control devices Mr. House used earlier in the episode. This opens up a whole new can of putrid shit, because why would Psycho Mr. House have not sent one of his Securitrons or hired hands to go retrieve these chips, especially when weighing their immense potential? He could have sidestepped the whole conflict with the NCR trying to steal Vegas out from under him by brainwashing the current leadership, or any poor fool to step into the Lucky 38 for that matter. There never would have been a need for House to find a lieutenant because, in theory, he could have had anyone do his bidding at any point. Also, it's incredibly lucky that no one over the course of 200 years managed to gain access to this vault and strip it of all valuable and interesting technology. It's not like there's an entire faction dedicated to doing exactly that, at least originally. And to make all of this even worse, the both of them watch this rando's head explode like a goddamn melon and still choose to leave the mind control device behind. Why not bring it with them in the off chance they happen to bump into someone capable of studying and coming up with a way to reverse engineer these chips? We are told that Lucy deeply cares about stopping her father from hurting others and bringing him to justice to provide some semblance of hope to the surface, but simultaneously couldn't care less about someone else getting their hands on this technology to do the exact same depraved shit her dad did with it. Every single layer of every single scene in this show is rotten at its core, with no thought or care put into the basic concepts of cause and effect, world building, thematic messaging, or characterization. The current moment exists for the sole purpose of showing you another element of the Fallout universe you recognize that's about to be demolished, serving as some sick, twisted joke that only the writers and tourists find funny. This is further evident with the show jumping back to Vault 31, revealing that Bud has apparently managed to trap Norm down here for weeks in order to prevent him from revealing his long-term plan with the other residents. Which makes absolutely no sense, given that he decided to make the brilliant 4D chess-level move during Season 1 of sealing Norm in the only room that gives him any leverage and access to the cryopod terminal. He could have threatened to kill Bud, since he's literally a brain-powered Roomba, or warned him that he's going to start killing managers, or thawed everyone, forcing Bud to open the door, which he would sort of need to do anyway, given that over half of Bud's breeding pool either murdered each other, or got brutally torn apart from Moldaver's Chucklefuck gang, leaving only a handful of people to currently repopulate and sustain the vaults for future generations. Norm has had all of these options from the very outset, and still chose to do absolutely nothing. We are supposed to believe that he is the only character in this series that doesn't have a favorite flavor of crayon. However, Bud presents him with an ultimatum. Either get in his dad's cryopod, or get injected with a chemical that will kill him instantly.
You're right, I only have 2 rational choices. Plenty of irrational ones.
What are you doing?
Thawing everyone.
No, it really is not rational, considering the alternative is death or indefinite cryostasis. Hell, had you not been stuck on dial-up connection for all this time, you probably would have made it out of here ages ago. But hey, at least the insufferable brainbot is dead now, so I'll take my W's wherever I can get them. Meanwhile, we discovered that Hank has made it to an ultra-secret Vault-Tec facility that also was running trials on the mind control devices, even trying to optimize and condense them down into a smaller form factor. After seeing the progress made here, he decides to tune his ham radio to a frequency that he assumes Mr. House is still using, and leaves a message informing him that,
I'm going to complete the work you started. When this is all over, you will be begging me to help you.
Don't worry, we'll tear into why that decision is beyond idiotic very soon. But it's also strange that he mentions nothing in his message about the Brotherhood of Steel having obtained access to cold fusion. You know, the most important technological development in all of human history. They now have the means of generating infinite energy. The existence of cold fusion not only trivializes past conflicts over resources like the Hoover Dam, or even the water purifier in Fallout 3, but it also trivializes every storyline currently in the show that's not centered around cold fusion, because every existing faction and force should be vying over it. The other chapters of the Brotherhood are aware of its existence. Whatever the hell the Enclave is at this point clearly knows about it. The remnants of the NCR knew about it before getting completely wiped out. Even Mr. House is well aware of its existence, since he had arranged to purchase it from Barr before the war. So if Hank's main goal with these chips is anything other than using them to force the Brotherhood to hand over the cold fusion, then it's a complete waste of his time. Which is a wild thing to say when factoring in just how destructive these mind control devices have already been to the pre-established lore and continuity of Fallout. Which perfectly segues into the next episode, opening up with a flashback of Maximus as a child walking around the former capital of the NCR. And it is thriving.
There's even more clean water down there than we thought. I mean, no one will ever have to worry about rationing again. We can grow more crops. We can have another kid.
Turns out a nuclear bomb was what caused the fall of Shady Sands. Who'd have thunk it? Despite Todd Howard's half-assed attempt to address this in an interview after the release of Season 1, it's clear that the rest of the creative leads for this season either gave him the finger, or he effectively caved and allowed them to double down on having Shady Sands nuked before the events of New Vegas. Obviously, this creates an avalanche of problems. How could the NCR have managed to hold the Hoover Dam after the first battle and continue to expand it out into the Mojave if their former capital, quote-unquote, getting destroyed essentially resulted in the collapse of the entire faction? Or why no one throughout the course of New Vegas ever mentions anything about Shady Sands having been completely wiped off the map? Not even President Kimball, who somehow flew from Shady Sands to deliver a message to the troops stationed at the dam. And since the Brotherhood swooped in to pick up what was left of the NCR, establishing themselves as the main power of the West Coast, then why has there been no attempt to retake Helios 1, or gain control of Hoover Dam, or reconnect with the Mojave chapter for that matter? The argument that Shady Sands was in a period of decline before it was nuked has always been a ridiculous cope defense for this show's trash writing, but this flashback actively goes out of its way to present the town as being arguably the most prosperous settlement depicted in the whole franchise, just mere moments before its destruction. Speaking of which...
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter. Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
I have stared into the abyss of dumbfuckery, and all I can do now is pray to God that it did not stare back at me. Because what the hell was even that? So Hank didn't launch the nuke that destroyed Shady Sands from a silo or have it drop from a vertibird. He just mind-controlled some random dickhead to hand-deliver it into the heart of NCR territory? Insanely lucky that this cart wasn't ambushed by raiders, or attacked by deathclaws, yaoguai, or any other mutant creatures roaming the wasteland. Insanely lucky that the cart never got searched at any of the NCR checkpoints set up along the way to Shady Sands. Insanely lucky that the mind control didn't wear off, or that this guy's head didn't explode before reaching the city. Because had any of that happened, it would have completely fucked Hank's entire plan. Not only that, but we also get the bombshell revelation that Hank already figured out or had access to functioning mind control chips 20 years prior. So why, in the goddamn, is he still running experiments on them in the current day? We learn later on that miniaturization is his ultimate goal, but that still doesn't explain how he just forgot how to get one of the regular chips working.
Go to your mom! Go!
Green is good, and green is good, and red is good, and yellow is good, and clip whatever you want.
Imagine having the audacity of thinking you can defuse a nuclear bomb by just cutting a single wire. That is a bold and unique type of stupid. I cannot stress enough that had he not poked around with this thing, the chances of the nuke being a dud or remaining dormant would not have been zero. Instead, he fast-tracked countless innocents getting vaporized, all because he was feeling himself a little too much.
There. Okay. Hey, son. Here. Okay, somebody's gonna come get you out, but until then, I need you to eat and drink very slowly, okay?
I mean, I don't really think there needs to be any discussion about this, right? Like, we can all just mutually agree that the Crystal Skull nuke fridge scene was stupid and shouldn't be Fallout canon.
Instead of having people be awesome, why not have them be dumb?
So we then return to Maximus, who has managed to get promoted tonight after taking credit for killing Moldaver by someone who is a squire, because apparently that's how all that works now in the Brotherhood, I guess. If you convince enough people to shout your name and whatever rank you want, you instantly become that rank. Excellent system. But after leading a strike team to recover a mysterious device, Elder Quintus reveals to him that it is the key to their new home. Horse shit. First of all, you're meaning to tell me that the Enclave, the remnant of the pre-war government, never at any point attempted to gain access to their top secret military base and recover their lost technology? There's straight up prototype weaponry, alien life forms, and pristine pre-war cars in there that these dipshits just decide to blow up because the Brotherhood had been reduced into nothing more than a bunch of frat bro morons in power armor that play hot potato with plasma grenades. Secondly, what exactly is someone supposed to do if the playground area that houses the mechanism that activates these windmills is also buried under mountains of sand? Which absolutely shouldn't be able to casually blow away these massive dunes, by the way, because that's not how sand works. It's like all this was designed somehow knowing that only these buildings themselves would get covered in sand. There are 80 million different explanations you could have written for why Area 51 remained untouched for all this time. Maybe the surrounding area to get to it contains extremely lethal amounts of radiation, or that the base is equipped with an advanced defense system that this device bypasses, or that the facility is simply overrun with feral ghouls. All of those options would have made infinitely more sense than needing to activate giant windmills to blow sand dunes away that conveniently only buried these specific buildings and nothing else. But pushing that idiocy aside, we jump back to Lucy and the ghoul, who overhear a wastelander scream for help from a nearby hospital. Lucy demands that they should go check it out and that she's not going to just let someone die. Now, instead of the ghouls suggesting that they can't afford of taking the risk of it being a trap, or that they're low on ammo or meds and aren't in any position to help them, Edgelord Cowboy touts back,
Empathy's like mud. You lose your boots in that stuff.
which is a monumentally retarded analogy to make, especially to the person who saved him from turning feral during Season 1 purely out of empathy. But she decides to storm off anyways, and he reluctantly follows after her.
We need medicine.
You off of Far West, ain't you?
I got one stim pipe left, okay?
Folks in them outfits don't deserve saving.
You know, maybe you should explain who and what the Legion are to Lucy to give context as to why they don't deserve to be saved. Also, they're clearly wearing slave outfits. For all he knows, the both of them could be on the run, making their narrow and desperate attempt for a better life. But nah, screw that. Empathy is lame and gay, so he randomly kills one of them like the deranged axe-murdering cannibal that he is.
No, not her too.
The fuck you mean not her too? Shouldn't you be more concerned that your traveling companion just randomly killed someone in cold blood and started chowing down on them? Little miss, I want to bring justice to the wasteland. The writing on the wall is written in blood over the fact that the ghoul is an unhinged opportunist, and the only just thing to do in response to this is to put a bullet in his dome to prevent him from hurting anyone else. Assuming that ghouls can even be killed at this point.
Give me a stim pack.
I only have one.
Give it to me.
She'll die without it. You won't.
Then why does she even hesitate if that's the case? It was already psychotic of him to throw this woman in front of the scorpion, but this new retcon of ghouls being immune to rad scorpion poison, that the both of them inexplicably were aware of before any of this happened, amps all of this up to a whole new level. He wasn't shielding himself, Cooper was actively doing everything in his power to get this woman killed. There shouldn't really be a decision for Lucy to make here. However, she helps the injured woman to her feet and tells her that she's going to bring her back to her group. Meanwhile, the Brotherhood managed to successfully activate their cold fusion reactor.
What do you think I'll do with it? Nothing good.
This seems incredibly out of pocket for Razorfoot here to toss out, when, aside from pulling her stunt to get out of patrol, she appeared to be more or less on board with the Brotherhood, even telling Maximus that there's nowhere out in the wasteland that's safe, and even leads the chant for him to get knighted. But shortly after this, we learn that Elder Quintus has called for a meeting with the other chapters, but is breaking the chain of command by not informing the Commonwealth, suggesting that the East Coast Brotherhood is now the main chapter, apparently. Except the main excuse people gave for the Knights of San Fernando being this order of depraved zealots that brand people and establish dominance over the wasteland, which is beyond the pale of how the faction has been depicted in any of the games, is that, well, they're a different chapter, and every chapter of the Brotherhood is going to do things differently. And if that is in fact what the show is banking off of, then how can Quintus excluding the Commonwealth from this meeting violate the chain of command if the Brotherhood of Steel is not a unified order that adheres to a codex of principles and rules? Because trying to have it both ways is inevitably going to result in infighting when you have multiple chapters with huge ideological differences. Not only that, but what exactly does the San Fernando chapter gain from wiping out the Commonwealth? They're in possession of infinite energy production. Sure, there's the potential that they might try to take it by force, but all Quintus has to do is threaten to destroy it if they attempt to mobilize towards the west coast. And the Commonwealth absolutely doesn't have the resources to uproot all of their forces to fight a war on the complete opposite side of the continent. Quintus holds all the leverage in this situation, and the only way he could lose it is if he were to do something crazy. Like, I don't know, leave mankind's most important technological development totally unguarded so that any random asshole can just walk in and take it.
They would take the relic and give us nothing in return. Does that seem fair to you?
That's taxation without representation. It's un-American.
Getting real tired of tourist season. No offense, but you guys are lowering the bar.
Having an elder of the Brotherhood of Steel invoking American political slogans and sentiments is the equivalent of having a Jedi Master tell their Padawan that they should fight purely off their emotions. The Brotherhood was formed due to Roger Maxson seceding from the Union with his forces after learning about the horrific FEV experiments being done at Mariposa. They viewed the US as a failed nation that destroyed itself through reckless technological hubris before the bombs ever dropped. And it makes no sense that an elder of an entire chapter, 200 years later, would champion the ideals of a country they originally seceded from.
What are you? An idiot sandwich.
These morons prime a goddamn grenade in the middle of this meeting filled with high-ranking Brotherhood officials who are drawing up plans for a civil war, and no one around them interprets this as an assassination attempt? Mind you, these are not Day 1 initiates either. They were somehow promoted to knights. This should not just warrant a disapproving glare, the both of them should be arrested and court-martialed. Again reinforcing that these writers have zero clue, and simply couldn't care less as to what the Brotherhood of Steel actually is. Meanwhile, as Lucy is bringing Slave Girl back to her people, we learn that she has actually led Lucy to Caesar's Legion. Now I realize that what I'm about to say is the understatement of the century, but it's pretty weird that this bitch would have any desire to go back, given that the penalty for a slave trying to flee the Legion if caught is death, a slow, agonizing one at that. She basically did everything in her power to not win the lottery. But it's also a colossal dick move for her to pull when factoring that Lucy saved her life just moments ago, and never mentions anything to her about who or what the Legion are and what they do to women, which many people in the world of Fallout consider to be a fate worse than death. What's even stranger though is that the Legionaries clearly spot Lucy, but for some reason still allow her to walk directly into their camp instead of immediately capturing her. And I don't know why Lucy wouldn't have just decided to turn back after suddenly losing sight of Slave Girl, given her experience with shady-looking armed characters in the Wasteland to this point. As I've said before, the show needs Lucy to massively regress past square one as a character in order to have another bit of Fallout iconography to flash on screen. That said, before we go on any further, I feel I should address that I won't be covering the vast majority of the subplots in the show. And that is purely because they're all totally pointless. Which is kind of a shame when it comes to Norm's plotline, because it's unquestionably the one that had the most potential. There could have been this powerful contrast between this group of people emerging to the surface to find that the life they once had has been reduced to ash, hit with the devastation that everything and everyone they ever knew or cared for is gone forever, and all they have left is each other, compared to Norm having no connection to anything on the surface other than what he's learned about through books, to discover that the outside world is not this desolate hellscape that many people in the Vault made it out to be, but something beautiful worth rebuilding, that there is hope for a thriving civilization on the surface. Of course, that can only come from people who care about the franchise for anything other than its brand recognition, because the reaction we actually get from the supermanagers emerging to the surface is,
"Oh man, the mall's gone."
Yeah, they're all just mildly disappointed that the mall is gone, followed by having the mall get killed by roided out rad roaches, so none of it really amounts to anything anyways. As for the Vault subplots, I'll bring them up whenever they become relevant, but as you probably already guessed, that isn't going to happen a whole lot. Now with all that business taken care of, we jump back to the Brotherhood having some sort of fight club where people are fist fighting each other in power armor. Because hell, why not? We've already debased this faction to a bunch of glue-eating shitheads. It's not like fully functional power armor is a rare and incredibly valuable commodity in the Wasteland that has to be maintained. But as Maximus is watching all this nonsense unfold, he's approached by some rando who challenges him to a brawl with no armor. For reasons still unknown to me, he accepts, where some real wild, wacky shit happens. Do you remember in Season 1 how an attempt on a fellow brother's life was an act so egregious that it would result in execution if the Brotherhood ever found out about it?
Pepperidge Farm remembers, but Pepperidge Farm ain't just gonna keep it to Pepperidge Farm self.
Bear in mind, this random knight is openly threatening to kill a member of the chapter, that now hold such insane leverage that they are openly discussing plans of carrying out a massive power grab against the Commonwealth. By murdering what is effectively Quintus's right-hand man, not only would whatever branch this rando is part of immediately fall out of favor with Quintus, it would most likely result in their total destruction. And it's really strange, to put it lightly, that no one from Maximus's chapter, not even Quintus himself, is making any attempt to intervene. The Brotherhood has now devolved even further into basically being glorified raiders with power armor. But yeah, Maximus ends up killing this guy, where an envoy from the East Coast crashes the party and informs them that he knows they were all discussing plans for a civil war. I don't know why the Commonwealth would only send one person to shut all of this down, rather than an entire show of force, since that would be the sole bargaining chip they would have in this situation. I mean, what exactly can the Commonwealth respond with if all these other chapters have already formed an alliance and decide to send Paladin Harkness here back in a body bag?
A good question. For another time.
Anyways, we kick off episode 3 with the reveal that Thaddeus is still very much a ghoul and has rounded up a bunch of child labor to remove bottle caps so that he can become filthy rich. A rather random and disappointing new bit that the writers have viciously stapled to his character, because Thaddeus was the only person in this show that I mildly tolerated up until this point. Nonetheless, all of this will become relevant later on in the episode, though for now we're gonna have to stick a pin in it. Because Lucy has been brought back to the Legion's main camp, which is no longer at the fort, but is still somehow set up in the Mojave.
You lost your legionary.
Please. Please. Please.
How is a slave supposed to be responsible for the safety of their legionary? Wouldn't that radically change the entire dynamic of slave and owner? I figured she would have been executed for trying to escape. And I guess Manlet Lanius here isn't interested as to what exactly happened. He just instantly decides to slice her throat.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Just to be clear, the show never lists him as Legate Lanius, so the absolute best faith interpretation is that Lanius mysteriously died, shattering the Legion propaganda about him, and Macaulay Culkin randomly got a hold of his armor. Because otherwise I would have to unleash unholy hellfire about why Lanius being a hobbit and casually taking off his helmet massively breaks Fallout lore. Either way, I'm still going to keep calling him Manlet Lanius.
Caesar. I believe Caesars were German, and you guys have more of a Roman theme, so I think it's Caesar. If I may, I'm a very...
We're negotiating the rights to your prima noctis.
Shame on you. That is awful. And secondly, prima noctis isn't even a Roman tradition. It's from the Middle Ages. They were just nasty people borrowing a Latin phrase. And you should know that I am not even a virgin. And that's not including all of the cousin stuff I did, which is at least a page or two on my resume. So, looks like we're out of options.
You're an insane, degenerate piece of filth.
It is so unbelievably deranged to have Lucy, the happy-go-lucky, naive vault dweller, start spouting off fedora-tipping Redditor tier dialogue after having just witnessed the woman she saved last episode get beheaded and mounted on a pike in front of her. Beyond it establishing Lucy as being even more insufferable than I could have ever imagined, having her be this self-aware about the fact that she's the main character and no actual harm can come to her just completely diminishes the gravity and tension this scene could have had. Also, Lucy is just completely dead wrong on everything she tries to fact-check them on. Because first off, they're all using the actual Latin pronunciation for Caesar, on top of her being totally clueless that the German word Kaiser translates to emperor and is derived from the Latin pronunciation of Caesar. Secondly, nowhere in New Vegas is it ever mentioned that the Legion practiced prima noctis. This was clearly something tossed in for her to lecture them over. But the ironic thing is, prima noctis itself isn't even a real medieval tradition. It was a myth popularized by certain philosophers in an effort to paint the Dark Ages as being worse than they actually were. So Lucy's attempt to, actually the Legion completely backfires and has her come across as some brain-dead moron who has no idea what in the hell she's talking about. All because the writers, who get paid actual money for this by the way, are incapable of doing a simple Google search. In response, Manlet Lanius decides to start escorting Lucy around the camp, despite officially being a full-blown slave at this point.
We've been at war ever since over who should be his heir. He wrote down the name of his successor and placed it into his divine pocket.
I don't think it's possible to have written a more ridiculous way for the Legion falling after Caesar's death. We are now supposed to believe that Caesar's entire line of succession inexplicably ended up breaking apart, leaving him to walk up on this hill and die of embarrassment or something, with the name of his new successor in his pocket, that he decided to not give to anyone because reasons, resulting in this dollar store no man's land being formed in the middle of the camp, where both sides shoot at each other if anyone gets too close to his body.
I can't take it anymore! I just want to die!
Jumping back over to the Brotherhood, Elder Quintus reveals to his inner circle that the other chapters have become spooked by Paladin Harkness's presence and have broken off support for an alliance. Why they are all terrified about losing influence with the Commonwealth, I have zero clue, when Quintus has laid out to all of them that they literally do nothing for the other chapters, are on the complete opposite side of the continent from them, and aren't in possession of the greatest technological development in human history. But hey, if this is the hill the show has chosen to die on, then so be it.
My lord, this Xander guy, if I could just kill him.
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You are a fucking idiot.
Well, any hope I had of Maximus not being a tard rage-fueled meathead this season has been completely shot to pieces. That was such a catastrophically worthless suggestion that he should not only be barred from future council sessions, it should have warranted a demotion on the spot. The irony, too, is that the writers try to portray this moment of Maximus having this temper tantrum as him suddenly realizing his elder isn't the person who he thought he was, but Quintus is objectively in the right in this situation. However, Maximus bumps into the man who he suggested to have killed just moments ago, and the two of them hit it off fairly well. Harkness even offers to have him tag along on a mission, so they hop in a vertibird and take off. Back over at the Legion camp, the ghoul has miraculously managed to track down Lucy and discovers that she's been strung up on a cross, like the filthy degenerate that she is. If the writers actually remained consistent with who they've established the ghoul to be, he would simply leave her for dead, not blink twice about it, and continue on the path to Vegas. But as we all know, Lucy is the main character, which means that the ghoul is now obligated to rescue her. So the creative lead's brilliant solution for how he's going to accomplish this is by just having him fast travel everywhere. Because otherwise, if we're expected to believe that the ghoul spent what is easily a day's walk IRL to Camp Golf, then Lucy should absolutely be dead by the time he returns with any backup. In fact, there is quite a bit of fast traveling that takes place across this season. Characters are conveniently at the precise spot they need to be at the most convenient time without any explanation because the script demands it. Anyone with any shred of intellectual honesty understands that the Fallout show is a completely different medium from the rest of the entries in the franchise, and certain mechanics from the games aren't going to translate into a live-action adaptation. That there is a clear difference between remaining faithful to the source material and invoking certain systems to lazily get out of corners that the show wrote itself into. That said, the ghoul exposits to Dogmeat that he can't rescue Lucy from the Legion on his own, and that this used to be the best place to get help, only to discover that Camp Golf is completely run down and abandoned, adding further confirmation that the largest faction in the entire series has practically been Thanos snapped out of existence, all due to one settlement getting blown up.
Where's Robert House?
He's gone. He had all the money in the world, but all he really wanted was to live forever. Oh, he had plans, all right, but he needed that cold fusion doodad from before the war.
Man, this is some bullshit!
Cold fusion was never a part of Mr. House's plan of advancing technological progress in order to send humans into space to search for other habitable planets, because otherwise he would have absolutely mentioned it to Courier 6. This is a blatant retcon that exists for no other purpose than to be a blatant retcon to New Vegas. But another glaring problem with this scene is that Victor heavily implies that House is now dead, so how the hell is he even still operational, much less at the former NCR Rangers headquarters? The moment Mr. House dies in the game, both he and Jane get completely deactivated since they no longer have their active programming. And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag right now that the only possible answer that could have worked is never remotely hinted at throughout this whole season. Pressing on though, the ghoul then fast travels to somewhere out in the middle of the wasteland and runs into some remnants of the NCR.
Where is everybody?
Up here it's just us. We've been cut off from reinforcements for more than a decade.
So they've just been chilling out here for over a decade? Doing what exactly? Sitting on their asses and shooting at random people roaming the wasteland? Why would they not have just gone back to the Mojave outpost, or back further into NCR territory to regroup?
When Shady Sands fell, we had a battalion out east.
Shady Sands. You do know that was over 20 years ago, right?
Over 20 years ago, huh? Looks like some people need to become more media literate.
I came to the NCR looking for help based on the cozy-ass assumption that the good guys would prevail in the great state of Nevada.
We're winning the war.
Based on what? You literally said a few seconds ago that the Legion has you boxed in. The NCR doesn't hold a presence on the Strip. Camp Gulf, along with every other military outpost shown, has been completely abandoned. And as far as I can tell, no faction is currently holding Hoover Dam, given that the dam never gets brought up by anyone. It's not like it's an extremely strategic and valuable resource that all of Vegas draws its power from, giving whatever faction or group in possession of it immense influence and leverage throughout the Mojave, which is why the NCR and Legion were fighting over the dam in the first place. Amazon's fog of war approach doesn't and simply can't work here, because we're presented with a character that has been around long enough to have seen the height of what the NCR was, and should have understood what their main goals were for the region, only to believe they are winning the war despite there being practically nothing left of her faction.
A piece of advice has helped me sleep at night over the years. When something's dead, it's usually because it deserved to die.
That is certainly a line of all time. Did the billions of people who died from the bombs deserve it? Did all the citizens of Novak deserve to be wiped out? Did Shady Sands, the capital of the group he labels as the good guys during this conversation, deserve to be nuked by a crazed Vault-Tec employee?
When something's dead, it's usually because it deserved to die.
Shut up! Will you shut up?
Regardless, the show jumps back over to Maximus and Paladin Harkness. The ship's radar has apparently picked up a couple of nearby power signatures, and they both decide that it's worth checking out, where we get this drawn-out struggle session between Xander and a Securitron, missing it several times with a super sledge, despite it being directly in front of him.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
But after that train wreck of a fight, they both stumble upon Thaddeus and his child sweatshop.
They're not kids. They're abominations. And so are you.
What you been up to?
I think I just started a war.
Yeah, well, I'm the floor manager here. So it sounds like we both got a lot going on right now.
I think this is the perfect encapsulation of just how much this show outright refuses to not only take Fallout's subject matter seriously, but even its own material. It's like pulling teeth getting these writers to have their characters ever engage in anything of substance. Thaddeus was left powerless, with no way to protect these kids, to give them something better than what the rest of the wasteland had to offer, where at the last second is hit with a whirlwind of emotions about being saved by the same man that attempted to murder him last season. There's quite a lot to work with there, but that in itself lies the problem. At the end of the day, it all requires some level of effort and care to create meaningful interactions between characters, and it's far easier for these hacks to reduce the entire moment into an absurd joke, to hide behind the veil of comedy under the delusion that it'll serve as a shield from criticism.
Instead of having people be awesome, why not have them be dumb?
Before wrapping up this episode, the Ghoul makes his way back to the Legion camp and proposes a deal to the acting Caesar that he'll reveal the location of the last NCR holdout in the Mojave if he agrees to release Lucy. It's rather wild that they instantly accept and mobilize troops to this location instead of confining the Ghoul to this tent until their scouts confirm his intel is legit, because he could have, and absolutely did, give them a totally random location. Then again, we are dealing with the current day Legion, who rely on a piece of paper in the pocket of a corpse in order to figure out what the chain of command is, but will shoot at one another if anyone gets too close to the body, leaving them to appoint new Caesars anyway.
False Kaiser and his followers. They shoot at us.
The Ghoul also manages to ignite a bunch of dynamite somehow while dragging Lucy across the Legion camp, and they both just sit there and watch the chaos without any concern that the soldiers would have automatically assumed it was him.
Crap, mega crap.
That said, we begin episode 4 with a flashback scene of Cooper Howard during his time in the army on the front lines of Alaska. Despite his partner's power armor being completely shot up and borderline inoperable, his CO still tells them that they both need to continue on with the mission.
What'd they say? They said you should turn back. What about you? Be right behind you.
Yeah, that is just not how that would work at all. Coop should have gotten court-martialed for disobeying orders, yet there's never any implication of that being the case. And it would be one thing if he had chosen to make sure that his squad mate got back safely, but he just chooses to stay out here, massively increasing the risk of either one of them getting picked off. Which is exactly what happens. And we're given another retcon that T-45 power armor was apparently totally useless during the war. The Chinese soldiers even lampshade about it before getting completely torn apart by this random deathclaw. That's right, you're getting 2 lore breaks for the price of 1. Now before I get people furiously typing away in the comments, yes, deathclaws were created pre-war with the goal of eventually seeing military action as cheap and efficient replacements for troops, but prior to this series they were never deployed onto the front lines. Furthermore, the typical deathclaws that you see in the games are a product of years of mutation from radiation exposure while roaming the wasteland, followed by the Master using FEV on them during the events of Fallout 1. So the one we see in this episode should be way smaller. And to really put the cherry on top of all this, the Deathclaw conveniently leaves Cooper alone, despite staring directly at him. Which could have been easily fixed by having his faceplate closed. The Deathclaw most likely would have assumed that he was dead and chased off after other gunshots. But no, we have to see the actors' faces, even though this entire scene is taking place on an active battlefield, and it makes no sense that he wouldn't have shut it the moment he started taking fire. But jumping back to the present, Maximus informs Thaddeus that Xander was an envoy of the Commonwealth, and his brilliant scheme of covering up his death in order to prevent a civil war, and from having all these kids either getting enlisted or gunned down for being abominations, is to have Thaddeus get in his power armor and impersonate Paladin Harkness.
That is the worst idea I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, this whole plan completely crumbles apart if this guy ever bothers asking Maximus what happened to his armor, or insisting that they go salvage what's left of it due to power armor being an incredibly rare resource and all that. And this isn't even tackling the most obvious problem that Thaddeus should have been outed on the spot. He can hardly use this armor, and yet this rando is supposed to buy that Thaddeus is a paladin and a liaison of the most dominant chapter of the Brotherhood. Not to mention that we get this real humdinger of a line later on this season.
Sure we gotta leave it?
There are trackers in these things. They'll come for it. That armor's more trouble than it's worth.
Which means that tracker would eventually lead the Brotherhood here, revealing that the actual envoy had his skull caved in with a super sledge, sparking off a civil war anyways. I would presume that's how this knight found Maximus in the first place. So Thaddeus impersonating Xander doesn't really accomplish anything, other than maybe buying these kids enough time to escape. But in fairness, where exactly are they going to go? There doesn't seem to be anything else for miles. But whatever, they take off in a vertibird, where we then cut to Lucy waking up back at the NCR camp.
We're the new California Republic.
And is this all that's left of you?
No, there's tons of us. We're just not here right now.
You know, it really is quite something how the writers, in a meta sense, depicted their most staunch defenders for this show, who unironically use this as an explanation for why the largest faction in the entire franchise is nowhere to be found as crazy freaks who talk to rodents. And what's even more embarrassing is that this cope defense immediately gets undermined by Captain Lady, who reaffirms that the NCR is a failed nation.
Sorry.
Some asshole saw the first sign of civilization taking shape on the wasteland in over 100 years. Chose to burn it all down.
However, before setting off, NCR Lady gives Lucy an entire crate full of weapons and ammo, with the reason being they aren't going to be able to take everything with them. Because I guess the NCR never heard about the concept of having supply caches.
Wasn't gonna stay, if that's what you're worried about. All I saw in there was more matching jackets.
It really is a shame that the Ghoul didn't leave you up on that cross. These people gave you medical aid, allowed you a spot in their ranks if you wanted it, and gifted you an entire military crate with no strings attached, but they're just as bad as the cons. The raiders who took over an entire settlement.
Till you matching jacket motherfuckers had to move in.
All I saw in there was more matching jackets.
Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
Back at the vaults, Betty and Eyepatch Woman discover that Vault 31 has been completely emptied and that Bud is dead.
The water crisis in 33 is getting worse.
Well, if I give you access to our vault's water supply, it would taint the work we're doing here.
Wow, hell really has frozen over. I didn't think the writers were even going to remember that the water crisis was a thing, much less that 32's chip is still working. Granted, it only took a mere 9 episodes to have a character mention the most obvious solution to the problem, but credit where credit is due, I suppose.
I appointed you overseer based on the understanding that we would support each other.
There's a keepsake box. Something from before the war that Hank brought with him to Vault 31. But if you bring me that box, I'll consider giving you access to our water.
So you're holding us hostage. Steph, if you don't help us, there won't be a Vault 33 anymore.
You know, Betty really wouldn't have had this problem if she had sent someone to retrieve Vault 32's water chip, or at the very least made herself the new overseer of 32 and left 33 to Eye Patch Woman. She was made out to be this cold, manipulative, and magically resourceful politician during Season 1, but now knowingly gives people that she has regular and fundamental disagreements with positions of total power and influence. But per usual, that plotline gets tossed on the back burner until the tail end of the season, so we will circle back to it eventually. In the meantime, we're shown Maximus arriving back to his chapter's Pridwin, and Razorfoot immediately spots that he has someone impersonating Paladin Harkness. Maximus reassures Dane that his 300 IQ strategy to prevent a civil war from happening is that he is going to murder Quintus during this summit, which would create a massive power vacuum amongst all these other chapters and lead to a civil war.
I like your plan, except it sucks.
After hearing this batshit scheme, Razorfoot decides to fast-track the Civil War by walking in and stealing the cold fusion. I feel it bears repeating that the whole reason Quintus called for this meeting was because he was concerned that the Commonwealth was going to take the capsule by force, but left it totally unguarded because he didn't think anyone would be crazy enough to take it, I guess. And instead of the Brotherhood initiating a lockdown and conducting some form of investigation after learning that the cold fusion has been stolen, because surely there would be some sort of universal protocol for dealing with something like this, everyone starts gunning each other down in this cafeteria, resulting with the surrounding airships shooting each other down. But while all of that madness is going on, Maximus pussies out from assassinating the Elder and seals him in his chambers.
I couldn't do it, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
Hey, you do not have to apologize for not killing someone.
Then why the hell is she going to allow him to follow through with killing Quintus? From Dane's POV, Quintus is obviously too reckless and ruthless to be in possession of cold fusion. So much that it's worth potentially being executed for treason over, but he's not so dangerous that he's worth leaving the Brotherhood for. That makes perfect sense if you just don't think about it. That said, Maximus and Thaddeus miraculously find a way down to the ground without using a vertibird to flee the battlefield with the cold fusion, which wraps up the entire Brotherhood Civil War storyline for this season.
Wow, that was the worst piece of crap I've ever seen.
Oh my god, that was an abomination. That was awful.
Not that I was expecting anything different, but seriously, what a limp dick payoff. So much of the runtime was dragged out, talking up a potential civil war with the East Coast, and getting the Commonwealth involved as a player in this conflict over cold fusion, only for it all to pop off in the most brain-dead fashion imaginable, and then to revert back to barely anyone giving a damn about this technology, along with the entire Brotherhood effectively getting put on pause until Season 3 rolls around. Maybe. I mean, who knows at this point? There are no guarantees with these absolute clown writers.
Instead of having people be awesome, why not have them be dumb?
So we then return to Lucy and the ghouls standing outside a new entrance to Vegas that didn't exist in the game, where we discover that the Kings are also roaming around out here, and are now feral ghouls. And I'm just going to go ahead and spill the beans right now that the show never gives an answer as to how or why this has happened. They are just ghouls now, and you have to accept that because things change. Much like how the show wants you to accept that Lucy is absolutely blasted out of her mind on drugs and starts mowing them all down with pure glee, even saying to the ghoul that, it's fine, they're just ghouls, right? Sort of spitting entirely in the face of the minuscule character progression she underwent during Season 1. To really drive it home, we get a slow-mo sequence of her blowing the brains out of the king himself. So thank you, Amazon and Bethesda. Truly, for having your new wholesome Quirk Chungus original character shotgun blast this franchise down into the dirt.
But it's extremely faithful to the source material.
Anyways, the both of them enter the strip to find that it's been completely overrun by a pack of deathclaws and narrowly make it out alive. Because it turns out the only line of defense between the residents of Freeside and total carnage is a thin chain link fence and some sheet metal that the deathclaws seemingly aren't strong enough to break down, but are powerful enough to deface whole-ass buildings. Furthermore, why have the people living in Freeside not banded together and cleared them all out of the strip already? I mean, I get it, they're deathclaws, but deathclaws can absolutely be killed. Especially if you had a group large enough that's armed, it really shouldn't be all that difficult. They are clearly an existential threat to the town, but nobody seems worried or mentions anything to anyone about dealing with them. They'd all just rather wander the streets and ask strangers to beat them up.
How does it feel to have lived long enough to see all of your favorite franchises go down in flames?
Feels great.
Regardless, the ghoul has finally found Lucy's drug addiction annoying as fuck, and makes the very bold decision to give her some caps to buy some Addictol to purge her system. Because as we all know, addicts would totally honor whatever purpose you gave them money for, and not blow it all to get another fix. Only inflation is a bit of a bitch right now, and has skyrocketed the cost of Addictol. So the workaround Lucy has come up with to deal with this pickle that she's in is to resort to stealing.
Are you Sonny?
He left town.
He's not in that trash can behind me?
It's the guy who tried to rob the place.
Did he come in here naked?
Yeah.
You're not gonna shoot me as I go. Sir, don't touch that gun. If you touch that gun, I'm gonna have to maim you.
It is straight up cartoonishly lucky for Lucy that this obese retard murdered the original owner and left the body to rot inside the store so that anyone could waltz in and find it. Otherwise, what she did wouldn't have been an obvious act of self-defense, but a heinous murder. She gets to remain the bubbly goody two-shoes out of pure contrivance so that she never has to be held accountable for anything, to never suffer any long-term effects from anything. It's been a recurring theme, so to speak, for her character ever since the first season. Lucy will suffer some horror that should leave her traumatized, fundamentally shaping who she is as a person and how she deals with others or certain situations going forward, only to have actually learned nothing from those experiences. And make no mistake, Lucy will not take anything away from this. She'll ultimately revert back to default settings, because the writers refuse to have her advance beyond anything other than the kind, naive fish-out-of-water archetype. Meanwhile, the ghoul walks into the Atomic Wrangler and starts reminiscing about a trip he took to Vegas, which transitions to another pre-war flashback. As was set up earlier in the season, Robert House has arranged to buy cold fusion from Barb during the summit that he's holding at the Lucky 38, and Moldaver wants Cooper to tag along with his wife so that he can assassinate Mr. House. Naturally, Cooper is pretty uneasy about potentially killing an innocent man though, so he tells her that he will get the cold fusion back, but that he's not going to murder anyone to do it. Upon entering the Lucky 38, Cooper is approached by who he believes to be Mr. House, but is given the grand reveal that
I'm Robert House.
How long have you been pretending to be this guy?
About 10 years.
he's managed to keep his true identity a secret for over a decade. Does anyone over at West Tech, Big MT, or Vault-Tec know they've been dealing with a body double for all this time? How has the general public never found out about this? Especially with Mr. House having been turned into the Fallout equivalent of Patrick Bateman.
Mr. Howard, I was there with you in Alaska. Not physically, of course. But I did license a piece of software to West Tech, which gave me access to the T-45 armor you wore. I saw the demon in the snow.
I'm not sure how the hell that's even remotely possible. Cooper had left his faceplate up the entire time, and there's not really anywhere in the armor itself that would be a good place to mount some sort of hidden body cam. House specifically mentions, too, that he leased a piece of software to West Tech, so presumably it would have been linked with the visors. Either way, he tells Cooper that their destinies are mathematically intertwined, and the reason he gives is that the moment Cooper bought his ticket to Vegas caused the projected date for the end of the world to jump a whole month. He knows this because he punched some random shit into a doomsday calculator, which means
I know everything.
But when asked specific questions about who is going to drop the nukes or how Cooper is linked to all of this, he repeatedly says that he doesn't know. once again further pissing all over his character and turning him into a total joke. Also, in the actual game, House's calculations for impending nuclear Armageddon were not a specific date that could get thrown off by some butterfly effect from the actions of one particular person that he monitors by having a bunch of spyware and everything apparently, but rather a general estimate based on current geopolitical conflicts. An estimate that he got wrong. Rewriting all this to be the other way around completely robs House of his intelligence and overall agency, because he himself never performs any calculations to arrive at the conclusion that an atomic war within the next 15 years is a mathematical certainty. He is purely a slave to a set of data churned out from a computer. Though House assures Cooper that the nukes will not be dropped by him, or anyone at that Vault-Tec meeting, he believes that there is a mysterious fourth player at the table who will press the button. I mean, it's not all that mysterious, it's the Enclave. As if that somehow magically makes the initial reveal during Season 1 any less retarded, because a good amount, if not the entirety of Vault-Tec's leadership was made up of the Enclave, so randomly tossing this shit in changes nothing, nor explain why any of these ultra-wealthy CEOs would eagerly sacrifice all their comforts and luxuries by destroying the world so they can live in a concrete box for the rest of their lives. However, House proceeds to screech at Cooper after being called a lunatic, which then brings us back to the current day. It turns out that Hank has managed to mind control Chickenfucker from Season 1 and has him relay a message to the Ghoul and Lucy.
Mr. McLean is watching over this gentleman's wife and daughter. However, Mr. McLean is willing to make a deal, one family's safety for another's, if you bring his daughter back to the safety of her vault.
You can't actually be considering this.
You are surprised that the man who has attempted to kill you multiple times, forced you to drink irradiated water, used you as bait, sold you off to have your organs harvested, enabled your drug addiction until it became too much of an inconvenience for him, and made it explicitly clear that he would do anything to be reunited with his family would betray you. I don't know how someone could walk away with the impression that the Ghoul isn't the type to backstab anyone over anything for any reason. But we can't really skip past just how brain-dead a decision it is for the Ghoul to even accept Hank's deal, because it involves having to massively backtrack, hauling Lucy off to her vault, and then make the trek all the way to Vegas again, in the hope that maybe Hank will release his family. The obvious thing he should have done in this situation is threaten to kill Lucy if he kills his family, forcing Hank to set up some type of exchange, shifting the leverage to put himself in a better bargaining position. Something that a seasoned wastelander would have a knack for doing by now. Instead, what we get is one of the most unhinged sequences in this entire season.
Five minutes later.
I'll be real, during my first watch through, I practically jumped out of my chair and had a bottle of champagne ready to go. For once, this insufferable moron did something useful, and we were finally going to be rid of the Ghoul forever. But then a part of my brain kicked back on just as I was about to uncork the bottle, that the Fallout series has turned being a Ghoul into a god-tier superpower. So much that it begs the question why anyone in this universe would choose to be anything else, provided they had enough access to Zombrex. Hell, they've basically established uranium as reverse kryptonite, where it completely regrows organs and broken spinal columns. In other words, the Ghoul should be very fucking dead, and it is beyond ridiculous that he isn't.
This is an excellent way to tell people who might not necessarily be familiar with the games about how ghouls work.
Unfortunately, this dumpster fire of an adaptation is still far from over, because we're presented with another pre-war flashback of Barb having a meeting with House's body double, once again confirming that he not only got the mind control chips past the prototype phase, but offered the technology to Vault-Tec in exchange for cold fusion, and further twisting the knife of how the hell the mystery of the Enclave eluded him for as long as it did when he conducted special business deals with their puppet corporation and sat in on their not-so-secret meetings of how they plan on blowing up the entire planet. Nonetheless, it's worth keeping a note of this plot point, because it won't be too long before it rears its ugly head again. Back in the present, however, Lucy wakes up in the secret Vault-Tec/Enclave facility underneath Vegas and discovers that her dad has been rounding up a bunch of people to continue on with the mind control trials. She eventually manages to track him down, where Hank, out of nowhere, immediately starts breaking out into a book review over All Quiet on the Western Front and his overall take on World War I.
To me, the most troubling was that everyone seemed to be fighting over nothing. French and the German, what was the difference between them, really? I mean, other than the uniforms.
I mean, yeah, if you remove every ounce of historical context and view it through the most basic bitch lens possible. Also, the whole point of All Quiet on the Western Front is centered around illustrating the horrors of trench warfare and how disillusioned the German side had become with their leadership and the older generation selling them this false promise of fighting for some grand ideal of fatherland while being completely removed from the consequences of the war. But to suggest that there was no difference between the Germans and the French during World War I other than their uniforms is patently absurd. The French were defending their country from being invaded.
That everyone seemed to be fighting over nothing. I saw the same thing up on the surface. People fighting over the most petty things, like bottle caps.
Teehee, aren't factions so stupid and pointless like World War I was? I mean, fighting over resources and sheer survival is so petty. I would never resort to something so low, like erasing an entire settlement off the face of the map just to purely spite my ex-wife.
But you stopped being your mother when she left home.
I'm so glad that some absolute knobhead from the writer's room skimmed through the spark notes for All Quiet, and then tried force-hammering their pseudo-intellectual nonsense about World War I in this episode, while somehow tying it to what they think Fallout should be. It's also pretentious and pedestrian at the same time. There's a common misconception that gets tossed around about how the creative leads at both Amazon and Bethesda have a fundamental misunderstanding about the central theme of the Fallout games, when in all reality they do understand it, or at least know that it exists. But incompetence and malice are not mutually exclusive. This conversation between Lucy and her dad is ironclad proof of that. It reaffirms that this series has subverted the phrase, war never changes, into a reductive and sweeping implication that all conflict mankind has partaken in and inflicted on each other, both past and present, has been over nothing. We are shown this with Flea Soup Lady grieving for her dead son, not because she genuinely loved him and is now alone in the world, but because he owed her money. It was made clear with the Brotherhood of Steel burning down Philly for no other reason than to burn it all down.
Back in Philly, before the Brotherhood of Steel burnt it down.
It was put on full display with the Legion fighting each other to prevent both sides from determining what the chain of command is, only to establish entirely new separate chain of commands. The show is littered with examples of Wastelanders being depicted as subhuman degenerates who are constantly at each other's throats over the most idiotic reasons in order to establish that all war and conflict is meaningless. A statement that is not only wrong, but totally antithetical to the original games. There is a stark difference between creating a character with a flawed worldview and one that is incapable of seeing how their solution of eliminating human conflict does not remotely come close to accomplishing that. The family members of the people who he has brainwashed would certainly not appreciate that he has kidnapped them, deprived them of all agency, and erased everything that made their loved ones who they were with no possible way of bringing them back, along with the general public not being on board with Hank seemingly being the arbiter of how everyone is forced to live their lives, once again creating more conflict. And instead of Lucy mentioning any of these rather basic points, or bothering to bring up the tidbit of her father having murdered her mother, we are subjected to this cartoonish depiction of the blood feud between the NCR and the Legion, where neither of them question where the hell they are, how they got here, or who any of these people are, and straight out of the gate start trying to stab one another. And the only way Lucy can stop this is to push a button.
Hey there, buddy. You okay?
Well, I seem to have found myself in a bit of a jam.
Such stunning social commentary. Regrettably, there's still more of the mind control Vault-Tec shit, but for now we wind the clocks back to the pre-war era, where Cooper is still at Mr. House's summit and is trying to find his window of opportunity to steal Cold Fusion from Hank. Luckily for Cooper, the mid-level manager, who for some reason has been entrusted with safely delivering the greatest technological development in human history, and securing this top-secret business deal that would forever shape the course of human history, has no security detail of any kind, or some Vault-Tec scientists regularly scheduled to maintain the device, or even having cameras monitoring the hotel rooms in the Lucky 38, where Mr. House screamed at Cooper 30 minutes ago about having spyware and everything. It's almost like all someone would have to do is simply drug Hank's drink, and they'd be able to snatch it from right under him since there's no actual lock on the briefcase. Which is exactly what happens. Only Cooper is confused because the only thing in the briefcase is the injection mechanism, where Barb suddenly bursts through the door and shows him how to extract the cold fusion. Because I guess she decided that following through with nuking the world isn't such a great idea after all, and maybe there is another workaround for stopping this deal from happening? Yeah, to call Barb's character confusing would be an understatement. She is directly threatened by Wilzig right before the big CEO meeting during Season 1, which is contrived beyond belief in itself since not every vault had cryopods, but that's besides the point, that if Barb doesn't follow through with the Enclave's plan to destroy civilization, that she and her entire family will be killed. Barb then insists to Coop that there is no way to stop what's already in motion, and that she's tried 1,000 different options to prevent this deal from going through, but also supposedly doesn't know who the Enclave are despite being pretty high up on the corporate ladder herself, and would surely be aware of who the current board members of Vault-Tec are.
Who controls Vault-Tec?
I don't know.
This isn't even touching on the fact that it makes no sense why the Enclave would tell her, or anyone for that matter, about the nukes in the first place. What benefit do they get from Barb knowing any of this? The board should have just assigned this to her as just some other business transaction. And as if any of this couldn't possibly devolve any further into pure asshattery, Cooper, in his interdimensional wisdom, ends up giving the device to the president, who is a member of the Enclave.
Oh, lovely. They've sent me a moron!
So all he accomplished during his entire fucking time screwing around in the Lucky 38 was just slightly delaying the deal from going through. Which then brings up the massive question of how and why House never ended up getting the cold fusion, when the Enclave's whole goal was to trade it in exchange for the mind control chips.
You're paying me for this. In exchange, I get cold fusion to power my little project in Vegas.
A problem I suppose Season 3 will get around to addressing. If we're lucky. What is incredibly lucky, however, is that the show transitions over to Maximus and Thaddeus stumbling upon dog meat while roaming the desert, where the pupper leads the both of them to the ghoul. Even more convenient is that he just so happens to know of a fully stocked abandoned NCR munitions warehouse, so they can stock up with weapons capable of dealing with all the deathclaws on the strip. Sort of makes you wonder why this wasn't his plan from the outset, instead of sitting around getting trashed in the Atomic Wrangler. If he really needed some extra guns, he could have hired some mercenaries up towards the entrances of Freeside. Then again, we wouldn't have gotten this gem of a line.
But in order to save that good person, you're gonna have to give it to a really bad person.
During my first watch through, I thought he was initially referring to himself as the bad person, but then I quickly remembered just how much of a turbo hate boner this show has for New Vegas, and was clearly referring to House. A judgment that is every bit revisionistic as it is insulting. One of Season 2's goals was to take a character that was morally nuanced, with an intensely pragmatic perspective on certain factions, geopolitical conflicts, along with how human progress should be achieved, and depict him as some psychotic megalomaniac in an effort to manufacture evidence that definitively establishes House as having always been this deranged freak, while aiming to elevate their absolute abortion of a complex anti-hero. Some of you may be wondering why I've torn so heavily into the ghoul more than any other character. And it's because Cooper Howard is the embodiment of nearly everything I unapologetically find disgusting with the Fallout show. He is the inspiration and face of Vault Boy, fought on the front lines of Alaska, witnessed the deployment of Deathclaws, learned about the Enclave's dumbass plan to destroy civilization, met Mr. House, met the inventor of cold fusion, somehow survived the nukes, can one-shot power armor, and is basically invincible. The ghoul is a blatant Gary stew that has been shoehorned into Fallout canon as being one of, if not the most important figure in the entire IP, but simultaneously is a depraved and incompetent moron that accomplishes nothing in the grand scheme of things. And what he does accomplish is purely due to Maximus being such a monumental dumbass that he's willing to toss away the most important piece of technology on the planet that he believed just moments ago could only be entrusted to Lucy, all for an NCR branded suit of power armor.
I clapped when I saw it!
However, now that the three of them are fully stocked up, this will completely turn the tide, and so they fast travel back to Freeside to receive an entire welcoming party of people cheering them on. Not just for making the effort to clear out the Deathclaws, but for the return of the new California Republic. which is a pretty damn strange thing for a citizen of Freeside to say, because anyone who's played New Vegas would know, historically speaking, the NCR had a not-so-great relationship with the residents of Freeside.
Why are they looking at us like that?
Never underestimate the power of brand recognition.
Good Christ, if that isn't Bethesda and Amazon's entire motto for their bastardization of Fallout. Meanwhile, we cut to a scene with Lucy having dinner with her dad, only to discover that Squirrel Whisperer apparently has no memory of anything prior to having been implanted with the mind-controlled chip, including his time during the NCR.
The new California Republic. It's just like the Legion.
I think I do understand. One side is murdering people, enslaving them, and the other side is just vaguely problematic.
I realized that purely from Lucy's experience with both groups that this would be her perspective on the matter, but this line more so comes across as a broad, out-of-touch meta-statement from the writers that the NCR was vaguely problematic, when the actual game gave way more nuance for why that wasn't the case. Caesar himself brings up the example of President Tandy having served for over 50 years and that her father was the Republic's first president, illustrating that the NCR was initially not so much a democracy, but a hereditary dictatorship.
Because the council didn't dare oppose her. She was too popular. She had the people's love. So things ran smoothly, more or less. And as soon as she was gone, as soon as there really could be democracy, what happened then? Ever since losing its queen, the NCR has been weaker, more diffuse. Democracy has been its weakness, not its strength. Greed runs rampant. The government is corrupt, accepting bribes from Brahmin barons and landowners to the detriment of citizens. The NCR is a loose conglomerate of individuals looking out for themselves. It's lost virtue. No one cares about the collective, the greater good.
Don't get me wrong. The NCR's got a lot of decent folk in it. It's just that they make you part of them whether you like it or not. Towns like Good Springs and Prim don't stay independent for long. Not if you've got something the NCR wants. Still, the NCR keeps the Legion away.
Sure, the NCR is the lesser evil compared to the Legion, but the amount of reverence the Wastelanders throughout this season have for the NCR is incredibly out of place, because as an institution, their presence was more so tolerated than embraced from the Mojave settlements. Nonetheless, all this is enough incentive for Lucy to finally go down to the mainframe and shut down the production of these mind control devices. She opens the door to find that the Congress lady from the pre-war flashback scenes is now a severed head that is currently being used to program new units. I don't necessarily see the point in Hank decapitating her when all he needed was to confine her to a chair or something and force feed her to keep her alive, or if nothing else turn her into a brain Roomba like Bud. Then he wouldn't have to worry about her decomposing by the day and could continue to use her personality type indefinitely to create as many chips as he wants. It frankly doesn't make any sense that Hank's been able to keep her alive, so to speak, for as long as he has. Dead insult to injury, Lucy starts quipping that surely there's a way to patch her up, once again taking a potentially meaningful moment of Lucy uncovering the depravity of her father's experiments and reducing it all into an irreverent joke, even having her get annoyed that supposedly everyone wants her to kill them all the time, when this is the first time anyone has ever specifically asked her to do that. But she reluctantly follows through after being begged to do so. But back on the surface, just as the three of them are fixing to deal with the deathclaws, Thaddeus's arm randomly falls off. There's been a lot of speculation that he's not actually turning into a ghoul, but a centaur, which would straight up be impossible because centaurs were created by the Master fusing the DNA of humans, dogs, and cats into a vat of FEV. But it would wildly break Fallout lore even further, so it's 100% something I could see the creative leads doubling down on. With Thaddeus down and armed though, the two of them press onto the strip to find that the deathclaws are starving and have resorted to eating each other, even though there are loads of people they could have fed on in Freeside at any time.
Actually, they aren't strong enough to break the gate down.
So why didn't they break down the gate? If I haven't made it clear enough, there are people who think that the Fallout show is not only good, but one of the greatest video game adaptations of all time, yet the writers can't nail down something as basic as deathclaws doing deathclaw things. This carries over into the people of Freeside refusing to pull out their weapons and open fire on them and decide to run away into nearby buildings. They even start placing bets as to whether the Deathclaws or Maximus is going to win, not realizing the obvious that if Maximus dies, they won't have any way to spend their caps. And the ironic thing is, they don't even need to necessarily leave the buildings. They could just fire from the windows or have people posted on the rooftops, which would be a huge help. The fight itself is riddled with a million different problems, but the most egregious is that this entire sequence effectively retcons a pack of Deathclaws into being less deadly than a single Yaoguai. Based off the show's depiction of power armor, Maximus should without question be dead, or on the verge of death here at least, but it's just a little scratched up after all that, because this NCR branded power armor that didn't exist in Fallout until this season is the bestest suit of power armor ever made, bringing up the massive question why these weren't standard issue with the NCR troops. A question that Season 3 will get around to addressing, I'm sure. But as this brawl is happening, in usual fashion, the ghoul ditches Maximus to deal with the Deathclaws on his own, and enters the lucky 38. Apparently, people never really needed special access to Mr. House's casino during the events of New Vegas, and could just press this button that's always been here.
Outstanding!
As he makes his way up to the penthouse, he discovers that Mr. House is dead, and that placing the cold fusion reactor activates an AI backup of Mr. House's consciousness.
What happens if I shoot this thing?
There's only ever been one of them, so it would be fresh snow from a scientific standpoint. But if it were to expel all of its energy simultaneously, the damage would likely extend to other planets, so I would exercise extreme caution.
This shit is capable of destroying planets? Why would he have waited until now to tell him this? And I guess Moldaver, the inventor of cold fusion, was totally unaware that her creation is potentially capable of destroying half the solar system. I feel like this thing should need to be stored in some multi-lock bulletproof safe, not in the neck of a decapitated head or a glass jar. Surprisingly, the ghoul does something sensible for once and decides to not shoot the capsule, where AI House tells Cooper that he'll show him where his family is being stored, but that he'll need to throw in a Pip-Boy. Meanwhile, we jump back over to Vault 32, where Stephanie and Cousin Lover are getting married. However, during the middle of their vows, he reveals that his soon-to-be wife murdered Jelly Mold Dude because he overheard her talking to Betty about holding Vault 33 hostage and wanting to continue with the Enclave's work. And the only reason Stephanie found out and was able to prevent him from spreading this around is because he directly told her about it and no one else.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
But when asked for proof over this accusation, Chet admits he destroyed the evidence because he is an absolute idiot. Except he isn't completely done firing off shots, because he pulls out her old passports and reveals that she's over 200 years old, and is Canadian?
Oh my god!
Wait, why is that a big deal? Sure, the annexation of Canada wasn't exactly smooth, but she still ultimately ended up becoming an American citizen by default. And regardless, why would anyone in the vaults care that she's a Canadian, or that she was woken up from cryo? I mean, yeah, it would be wild to find out that she's over 200 years old, but that information wouldn't dramatically change anything about their living situation. But Steph runs off and locks herself in the Overseer's office, basically repeating the same experiment that was held in Vault 32, and she boots up the special Enclave Pip-Boy, setting Steph up for Season 3. Oh, and we also get a plot twist before this episode that Steph is Hank's secret pre-war wife. Which makes the bit of Lucy telling her that she's been having sex with her cousin for over 10 years 1,000 times more awkward than it already was, because she unknowingly admitted all of that to her stepmom.
After 10 years of cousin stuff, I'm definitely excited for the real thing. Oh, Lucy.
What the fuck?
Anyways, we jump back to the Legion Civil War, where Manlin Lanius has managed to drag Caesar's body to their main tent, and unfurling his secret note which reveals that Caesar actually didn't want his nationalist, homogenous, imperialistic society, equal to the challenges of the wasteland with the goal of long-term stability whatever the cost, to live beyond him. His entire line of succession was all a ruse, and he was just LARPing the entire time. He thought it would just be a bit of fun to conquer a bunch of territory and absorb other cultures into the Legion, only to let all those areas dissolve back into whatever settlements or tribes they consisted of after his death.
Instead of having people be awesome, why not have them be dumb?
Returning back to Lucy, Hank tracks her down and isn't all too thrilled that she shut down his mind control device mainframe.
You know, Robert House wanted to turn human beings into machines.
No, he fucking didn't. This is hate fiction garbage that the creative leads shamelessly crammed into Fallout canon and are actively trying to gaslight fans of the series into believing has always been the case.
What's your endgame with all of this?
Miniaturization. Soon, we won't know who's been automated and who hasn't. You just have a little scar on your neck.
Except, the people who haven't been automated would absolutely be able to tell. The chips erase the user's previous memories and overwrites the personality traits they had with entirely new ones. Being able to conceal the devices in people's necks is totally irrelevant. Not to mention that Hank wanting to brainwash her to forget everything she's discovered here and be the daughter he wants her to be completely demolishes his entire point. Of course, because Lucy is the main protag, she is once again bailed out by the ghoul. It's as if the only thing the creators of the Fallout show know how to do is toss out some plot point, twiddle their thumbs for a while in confusion, and then resort to some crazy deus ex machina to resolve anything because they're incapable of properly establishing a through line between point A and point B. And speaking of deus ex machinas, back on the surface, things are looking pretty bleak for Maximus, until suddenly... That's right, somehow the NCR returned. As if some throwaway line from Captain Lady having a small battalion somewhere out in the middle of the wasteland is supposed to explain why Camp McCarran, Helios 1, the Sharecropper Farms, Camp Golf, among a slew of other NCR installations are complete ghost towns. Or any explanation why they came back here to begin with. I mean, maybe Captain Lady wanted to rescue Squirrel Whisperer, but how did she find out that he was brought to Vegas? And why did Hank only capture Squirrel Whisperer, not her too? Another bit to add onto the pile of issues for Season 3 to resolve, I suppose. Either way, shills and sycophants will desperately try to spin this scene as proof that the NCR has been around this entire time, when there's been example after example of that not being remotely true. Jumping back over to the ghoul, though, he finally reaches the floor where his family's being kept.
Shall I open it, Mr. Howard?
Open it.
What a shame. You bet on hope, Mr. Howard.
For the first time in 200 long-ass years, I know my family is alive.
What infuriates me to no end with this reveal is that this lobotomite spends 2 whole seasons searching for his family, all because he forgot which vault he put them in, only to start huffing massive copium about how this random postcard is definitive proof that his family is still alive, when he has no idea how long ago this note was written. And most of Colorado is Legion territory now, so it's extremely weird she would have written this in the current day. But you want to know what's even worse? It's that Barb knew about the mind control devices. She would have absolutely seen all the horrific experiments and research being conducted here, and still chose to do absolutely nothing at all about it before leaving the facility. If anything, Barb practically kept the lights on for Hank so that he could just stroll on in and continue to produce more of them. Back over to Lucy, she leads her dad at gunpoint out of the Lucky 38. That's right, House's invisible adversary that he spent so much time trying to unveil managed to build an entire goddamn facility directly underneath his casino. Amazing stuff. However, she's implanted Hank with a mind control chip so that she can turn him into the father she always wanted him to be, which is every bit as evil as what he was about to do to her, and doesn't really factor in the whole justice element into the equation. All Lucy would be doing is some Clockwork Orange type shit, where he would just be incapable of hurting others in the future, not actually bringing any form of closure to those still affected from the events of Shady Sands. But before she can press the button, Hank informs her that he already sent out a ton of boxes full of mind control chips all over the wasteland, and then pulls out his big red button that erases his memories. I'm a little confused why he would even tell Lucy anything more he has planned when she's already proven to be rather effective at shutting down his operations. Wasn't his desire from the very beginning to conceal the truth of what he was doing from Lucy?
I did what I did to protect you. But maybe it came at too high a price.
though it seems only fitting that the season would effectively end on such an anticlimactic note. This whole adaptation was jumbled together from out of nowhere, only to go nowhere, and accomplish nothing other than the complete destruction of everything else that came before it. And it's a shame because Fallout used to really be quite something. A fully fleshed out world about society rebuilding from the ashes of nuclear devastation, teeming with complex factions and settlements, morally nuanced characters, meaningful player choice, only to be turned into a punching bag for out-of-touch game developers and Hollywood hacks to pound away on. Because as I've said before, Bethesda and Amazon did not earn the Fallout franchise, they paid for its brand recognition. And the source material to them has become, and perhaps always has been, nothing more than a vehicle for their microtransaction shops, or revenue to be extracted from a streaming service. It is simply delusional to claim otherwise.
Never underestimate the power of brand recognition.
Now if you'll excuse me, I need to go bleach out my retinas for the next several hours. But if you enjoyed this video and want to support what I do, then hitting like and subscribe down below helps out immensely. Either way, thanks for watching, and until next time.
Get that jelly mold out of here!